There. Now, hopefully, you'll have sound back to the situation. I'm sorry that I was describing that. Those of you who missed it, I was just sharing about the Good Morning America reporter that came on to do a live broadcast without wearing pants. And I can assure you, I do have pants on today. Um, we Today we are going to be focusing on the podcast app. And so again, welcome. This has become kind of a regular thing for us. Every Monday and Thursday, we're coming live, exploring a topic. Today, we are going to focus on podcasts, right? And so, I've decided there were three things that you needed to know about podcasts. Um, and hopefully there'll be good information here, regardless of whether you've experimented listening to podcasts or if you're brand new to it. All right. So here's the three things that we're going to explore. Number one, let's explore what is a podcast, right? Let's define what it is. And is it true that podcasts are free? The answer to that is kind of free. All right. Number two, we're going to explore how do you listen to podcasts? And if you have an iPhone, it is incredibly easy because your iPhone comes with the podcast app. And so we will explore that app. And I think you'll find that it will be easy to get started. The third thing we want to explore is how do you find a podcast that interests you? And we want to offer a couple of strategies for finding a podcast. You're only going to listen to a podcast if you find a topic that's interesting or news interesting or a podcast about your hobbies and so forth. And we'll show you that. And then, of course, we'll end the session as we always do. We'll take you into the Senior Tech Club site and show you some of the information that is available on the site. All right, so with that, let's continue our conversation. First of all, uh, always have a couple of housekeeping rules, and in this environment that we have chosen, I want you again to pretend like we're sitting around the kitchen table and that we all have our cup of coffee and essentially somebody on the table just asks, "Hey, have you ever tried doing a podcast, listening to a podcast?" And I'm going to speak up and say, "Yeah, let me show you how to do that." And again, remember that I cannot see you, I cannot hear you in this given platform, but that does not mean that I don't want to listen to you. So I would still like to see your questions and comments. For instance, I had gotten a comment earlier that I didn't have, there was no sound, and so you can comment by using the YouTube chat function on the right hand side. If it so happens that you are not logged in to um, YouTube and cannot chat, it's also possible for you to um, simply send me a text message, and I will be monitoring these text messages during our conversation today. I've got that sitting right down here. And then finally, at any point in the future, particularly during this COVID crisis, if you have a question about your iPhone and or iPad, or for that matter, any technology question, send me that question via email. You can just send it to questions at seniortechclub.com, and I'll just be sure to follow up and see if we can find that answer for you. All right. So I promised you that we would talk about three items related to podcasts. First question is, what is a podcast? Right? If you've never been or experienced listening to a podcast, you have to say, well, what is it? Well, definition number one is it is a downloadable audio program. Downloadable in that you would find a podcast on the internet, right up on that big cloud, and you would download it to your iPhone or computer or iPad. Oh, excuse me. There it is. Okay. That topic, the topic of this program could be an original topic. There are thousands of podcast developers who are recording content that is specific to their interest or their hobby or their particular topic. Or you might also find that a podcast could simply be a recording of a broadcast show. So, as an example, if you have a public, a favorite show that you listen to on public radio, there's a good chance that you could also listen to that show via a podcast. Another example, we have a sports radio show in this area, and that show, and many of those shows are available via podcast. Makes it easy to do time shifting, right, on those shows. What are the key benefits of podcasts? Well, there's a couple. Number one, you can listen to this audio program on your own time, right? You do not have to be dependent on a broadcast time. Benefit number two, you can listen to this audio program anywhere. You can listen to it in your car, do it at work, do it at home. You can listen to it while exercising. You could even listen to it at bedtime and use the built-in sleep timer in order to in order to to have your podcast turn off at a certain time. Gives you a lot of flexibility. So how popular are podcasts? Well, the source that we're going to propose that you use for your podcast would be the Apple iTunes store. And it turns out that Apple has 550,000 podcast channels and over 30 million episodes. Right. So as an example, going back to that sports talk show, if you listen to an ESPN sports talk show, that would be a podcast, and that podcast might have a daily episode that you could listen to. Right. The current statistics suggest that about 90 million Americans are listening to podcasts every month. Now, yes, podcasts are more popular among the 25 to 50-year-old age segment. However, 55 plus is a growing segment. Well, that's the space we're talking about. In that, what we want to do is to spend some time, introducing you to the concept of a podcast. Right. So now, our podcasts free? Yes. All of the podcasts that you source from the Apple iTunes store are free. However, there's always a little bit of a hitch, and I always want to make sure that people understand what the hitch is. In that, podcasters are typically looking to make money with sponsorships and embedded advertising like endorsements or maybe selling merchandise, selling classes, selling paid subscriptions in the content of that podcast, right? So the point here is that yes, you can download all of these podcasts from the Apple iTunes store and they are free to listen to, but just be aware of the fact that you will often hear some sponsorships, some sort of embedded advertising within the content of that show. Not a major deal, all right? So in that respect, it's a little bit like broadcast television, right? You have to listen to a few advertisements on occasion. All right. So question number two, that we talked about is how is it that you actually listen to the podcast? Well, the easiest way to get started is to use the podcasts app that comes on your iPhone. Right? It comes there, it's already installed. And what you're looking for is as you scroll through your screens, is you are going to look for this purple podcast icon. It'll simply be identified as podcasts. Clearly, this is the easiest way to get started. Now, as you develop experience in podcasts, there are other tools that you can explore. And in fact, if you're looking, if you are looking at my screen on the right hand side, right, you see the purple podcast icon, there's another icon right next to it called Downcast. Downcast is an alternative podcast app that you can use. I use it because it probably does a better job of managing the content that's stored on your device. But don't worry about that for now. If you simply want to get started, I would highly recommend using the podcast app. And when you do that, you simply tap on the app, and that will bring you up to the main screen. All right, so let's take a little bit of a tour, right, of this app. And we're going to do it in kind of a sequence, right? When we do this tour, I actually want to draw your attention down to the bar at the bottom of the screen. Right? And so we're talking, in this particular case, we're talking about these icons on the bottom, and you have a play bar right on the bottom of the screen. All right, so Um, one of the first things that you do when you fire up this podcast app is you're going to ask, well, how do I find a broadcast? And on the bottom toolbar of your app, you see two icons that on my live screen on the right hand side, I'm highlighting here. You have a browse icon and you have a search icon. Well, we're going to take a look at browse first, right? If you choose browse, right, like I have done here, you are now taken to a screen that Apple provides you where you can browse some of the available podcasts. Really easy, really straightforward. So as an example, if I scroll down this list, excuse me one second here, I'm just gonna close this door. I scroll down this list, I can find a number of categories. All right, and these are all items that Apple has put together for us. I want to stop at one place that's called Top Shows. So, one way to get started with a podcast is to scroll down until you see top shows. And then I am going to tap on where it says see all. And it is now going to present me a list of the top podcast shows, right? Some of these are newsy. Some of these are like Joe Rogan is a comedian that does a lot of commentary. There are a number of these shows that might be of interest to you. I'm going to go back to where it says browse, in that there are other ways that you can browse this list. Right. So, as an example, Apple will create curated collections. All right. So where their editors have gone through and they've selected podcasts that they would like to feature. And that's what you're actually seeing on the top of this page. So, for instance, one of the curation topics that they have is about the coronavirus. And so if we wanted to see those podcasts that might keep us up to date, right, in terms of what's going on with the virus and various treatments and so forth. And some of these are from like the Daily is from the New York Times, the Journal is from the Wall Street Journal, the Post is from the Washington Post, and you have a number of these that might be good examples. Right. So what you have when you head down this browse path, you have the ability to then see these curated lists or these lists of top shows. Okay, now, so when you head down this path, the question becomes, well, what if you find something interesting? So, as an example, on my screen on the right-hand side, I am looking at the journal. The journal happens to be the podcast of the Wall Street Journal. So I'm going to tap on it, and I am given a bunch of information that I think is relevant to us. Right? First of all, I would like you to notice that there is a rating area. so that this journal podcast is given a rating of 4.5, and that was done over about 1,400. Oh, yep, 1.4 thousand ratings, 1,400 ratings. Um, if you're concerned about the quality of a podcast, this would be one place where you would look. If it's popular, if there's lots of ratings, if it's highly rated. Another item that you can consider is, if you find something interesting, is that you can subscribe to a podcast. And so if you simply tap on the subscribe button, that would subscribe. And now it indicates on the screen that you can see that I am subscribed to the Wall Street Journal podcast. All right, so what does that mean? If you subscribe to a podcast, that means you're going to automatically see the episodes of that podcast show up on your iPhone or device. It makes it easy for you to follow somebody. So if you think you might want to follow the Wall Street Journal regularly, subscribe to it. That way you will see all of their episodes show up in your Listen Now queue. Now I'm going to show you Listen Now in just a bit. Another strategy that you have, and I reference this on my slide on the left-hand side, is if you look at the episodes, all right, and so as I swipe down, I can see some of the recent episodes. For instance, there is a topic here that says Georgia tries to reopen. And so if I am simply interested in listening to that, just tap on the episode so that you can listen to an episode without actually subscribing. All right. And so I tap on the episode, and it will then, you can actually see on the screen. Oh, I clicked on the wrong one, the only grocery in town. But if you click on that, you can see that episode is now playing. It's now sitting on my toolbar. I'm going to stop that right for now. And the point here is that you have the ability to simply play an episode. So if you see a particular show that seems to be interesting to you, just tap on it. Now I'm going to go back. I'm going to tap on Browse at the bottom of my screen. It gets me back to the standard Browse window. Your second strategy for finding a podcast of interest to you is to do a search. And so to do a search, I'm going to have you tap on the magnifying glass on the toolbar. And when you tap on it, it will then give you access to a search bar. All right, so now this is kind of an interesting opportunity when you explore search, in that in this search bar, you can look for a show, right? So if you know a specific show that you want to pursue, you can type the title of the show. But you can also look at other topics. For instance, if you have a hobby, or if you have a certain individual you would like to follow, you can actually type that into the search bar. Right. So let's do some exploration in this path. So let's imagine that a hobby of yours is knitting. All right. So we literally can type knitting into the search bar, just like this. And I am going to tap on search. I am now searching knitting. And sure enough, we have a number of episodes and podcasts that focus on the topic of knitting. I would challenge you to put, you can even do this as we're talking right here, to put your favorite hobby into this search bar and see if you get a result. So, for instance, if you are into ballroom dancing, I'm going to type ballroom dancing in the search bar and tap on the search button on the bottom of the screen. And sure enough, here is some of the episodes of ballroom dancing. I can tap see all, and here is the entire collection. All right. Now, this might be podcasts that focus on the topic of ballroom dancing, or we could also be looking at a podcast episode that specifically addresses ballroom dancing. Right. So here's the point. We looked at two different strategies for finding a podcast that works for you. Number one, you can tap on the browse icon on the bottom of the screen, and then you're going to be looking at these curated lists that come from Apple, the top charts, others that might be interesting or relevant for the time. Your other strategy is to tap on the search button, and with search, you can then use the search bar in order to search for a particular, right? Two ways to do that. So let's talk about listen now. So if you go to the bottom of your podcast app screen, there is an icon for listen now. And there are two components to listen now that I would like to focus on. Number one, you have the listen now queue, right? So if you look at either screenshot that you see, both were taken this morning. Um, for instance, on the right hand side of my live screen that you're looking at right here, um, this listen now is the current queue. So what happens is if you simply launch um, the first item on the list to play it, it'll just walk down this queue of items, right? So the listen now queue really represents the list of podcasts that you have queued up. The second thing that you have, when I do want to talk about one thing before we move on, in that if you look at this list and you say, well, there's something on here that I don't think I'm going to want to listen to, the question becomes, how do you delete something off of the current queue? Well, I tell you what, you can do exactly what you do in text messages and email. Anytime you have something presented in a list, something for you to try is to simply do a swipe left on the list. All right. So if I go to this Trevor Noah interview, I can swipe left on that list, and I am presented with a delete option. And now I can tap on delete, and that episode will be removed from the list. Now, deleting that episode does not change any subscriptions that you have, nor does it really change the full content of your library. What you're doing is you're simply deleting an episode from your Listen Now list. Second item that you have that's part of the Listen Now tool set is your player bar. And so your player bar is the bar with the play arrow down at the bottom of the screen. So if you simply want to start listening to a podcast, you can tap on play, the arrow, or now you can tap on pause in order to pause that podcast. Really simple, really straightforward. Now, one of the things I do want to do, however, is I want to show you some of the more advanced player controls. And so in this particular case, if you go down and if you tap on the play bar, that will then give you the full set of player controls. Now, we're not going to explore all of these today, but I would invite you to come on to the Senior Tech Club website if you want to explore all of the capabilities. Let me just do a real quick run through. You've got an arrow that you can use to stop or start a podcast. You have skip back, you have skip forward. You have a slider where you can control where the volume of a podcast. You have the ability to speed up a podcast. For instance, you can go to 1.5 speed, right? You can actually, slow it down if you want. And there are other controls, even one that's off the screen. If you scroll down just a little bit further, you actually have your sleep timer. So if you would be so inclined that, hey, instead of watching TV at night and seeing the effects of that blue light coming at you, maybe you would like to listen to a podcast as you fall asleep. There is a sleep timer where you can turn it off after 30 minutes or an hour, just like on your television set. All right. So that's the player control of the podcast app. Let's talk about unsubscribing and deleting. Right? The fourth icon that's at the bottom of the screen is the library icon. And so the library represents your library, my library. And so if you tap on library, you are now presented with your subscriptions and your episodes. So as an example, I happen to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. And so if I tap on the Wall Street Journal in order to pull up this subscription information, this is where you can see the episodes, and like in this case, it's telling me that I'm all caught up. I have all of the episodes um, uh, that are available. But there's a couple of important controls from the setup, in that if you click on the three dots, right? So, as an example, if you are tired of this podcast or you would like to move on to something else, you can tap on the three dots, and one of the items that you have on the list of commands is unsubscribe. That's identified as number two on the slide on the left-hand side, or you can also say delete from library, and that's identified as and that will actually remove all of the episodes from your device. All right, those are two that you may use. You're going to experiment, and it's no big deal if you get a podcast on your device that you don't listen to at some later point. You simply click on those three dots. Right, remember how we did that? We tap on, I'm going to go back to the library. And so if I go into my Daily Show podcast, and if I want to delete or unsubscribe, I would tap on the three dots. Unsubscribe is one of my options here. Delete from the library is another option, right? So these are all useful functions that will help you manage your collection. Okay. All right, we did it. We actually went through the three primary topics. Let's do just a little bit of review on some of these topics. Right. So number one, what did we learn? Right. We learned what a podcast is. Right. A podcast is nothing more than an audio program that you will download from the internet. The beauty of it is you can listen to it anytime, any place. You have control over what you listen to. It's not like a broadcast medium. You get to decide. Number two, how do you find a broadcast? Well, this is one. I just want to slip back to the screen for a second. And a good way to find podcasts is to use either the browse or the search icon on the bottom of the page. Browse allows you to browse some of the curated topics. Search allows you to search for a hobby or a specific topic. Item number three, how do you play a podcast? Well, it's really easy. If you're looking at something like on the screen here, and if I simply want to play something from Trevor Noah, I can tap on it and it goes automatically down to the play bar. If I do listen now, it's now at the top of my listen now button. Listen now is your queue of podcasts. If I'm done with this one, I can do a swipe left to delete. And then finally, if I wanted to unsubscribe from a podcast, I would click or tap on the three dots, and then unsubscribe is one of the options that I have there. Right? That's it. And as a summary, if you haven't explored podcasts, it's become a very popular media these days. I would encourage you to try it. The good news is you already have a podcast app on your device. you are, you likely are already connected to the iTunes store. You can begin shopping for podcasts immediately, and you can buy them as you wish. All right. So follow-up questions. Um, I'm tracking my list here to see if there's been any. No questions. You can send questions after the fact. Send them via email to questions@seniortechclub.com. If you want more information on this topic, you can also go down to the Senior Tech Club website. I'm just going to show you what that looks like. And so this happens to be the Senior Tech Club website. This is how you got to the topic today, very likely. Um, this number 7, how to listen to a podcast, is today's topic. Click on this link here, or after today, this link is going to show up on my catalog of previous sessions. All right. So by the way, if you are interested in revisiting any of our previous sessions, right, you can click on it here. Right. So in this particular case, I am just going to click on live number 7, and it will then take me to the specific site for this um, this live session. Um, this section in the middle is going to be replaced with a video of the archive on YouTube. Here's where you can download the slides, and here is where you can take a look at some of the nuggets and recipes that we have created for listening to podcasts. Right. So once again, if I tap on listening to podcast app, this is now information available at the Senior Tech Club website. And what you have is narrative and a description of the process. So here, as an example, remember the things that we talked about with the player bar and listen now, library and browse? Those are all identified this location. If you want to talk about search, if you want to talk about finding podcasts, our 2 recommendations, information on subscribing, ratings and reviews. I talk about that. I also talk about how to save cellular data and storage, listening to podcasts. So there's much more than what I'd be able to cover on this short online session. Okay. And then finally, we're done for the day. Thanks for coming along with this exploration of the podcast app. Appreciate you being here. In the meantime, I hope that I see you next Monday. Next Monday, we're going to explore the Zoom app. Zoom has become a bit of a rage these days. Everybody's doing Zoom meetings. So we're going to talk about what you need to know about attending a Zoom meeting. So, so we see you next time. Please stay well, stay at home, wash your hands, and keep on learning. And we'll see you. Thanks for coming.